Hello everybody, it's everyone's favourite feisty feline, Zephyr's Grace Paws here. If you're new around here, why not subscribe for more furry fandom content? Go on, it's free. So for those of you unaware, there's a huge trend on YouTube recently, Iceberg videos. This is where a topic's laid out against an iceberg with like the more normie topics at the top and slowly descending into the spicier topics. So with that being said, today we're going to look at the furry fandom iceberg. There are some pretty spicy stuff, so consider this your warning. We're on a one-way trip to Flavour Town. Oh. This is a super common furry phrase which you can see the history of in my History Of video. The term is used to denote sexual interest or shock, as in the full phrase, oh, what's this? Earth Eternal. So a lot of you probably won't know about Earth Eternal since it's a pretty old game. I mean, I didn't even know about it before researching this video. Essentially it was a browser-based MMORPG that opened doors in 2009 before closing down in 2010 due to the developers going bankrupt. After that point, the game was sold to another company who reopened the website with the promise of relaunching the game in around 2011, but unfortunately the game was never relaunched and the website went offline in the same year. The game itself isn't inherently furry, but there's a lot of, playable races that are anthropomorphic animals. Aside from goblins, trees and robots, the rest of them are all anthropomorphic. If you want to play the game, there are several private servers out there for you to check it out. Odd Ones Out is a furry. Okay, so The Odd Ones Out is a YouTube animator with 16 million subscribers at time of recording, who is often like the focus of the furry fandom, because The Odd Ones Out has a fursona and a fursuit, but despite that, they still deny being a furry, and it's kind of like a whole meme on the furry subreddits. To call The Odd Ones Out a furry, they welcome it and they sort of leave subtle hints and rumours through Twitter and in videos, kind of keeping the mystery alive. Sonic Fox. Sonic Fox, also known as Dominique McLean, is a professional esports player specialising in fighting games. They're also a well-known furry, going as far as to wear their fursuit at esports events. They've won numerous tournaments and have been named Esports Player of the Year 2018 at the 2018 Game Awards. Rainfurrest. Almost everyone's heard about this event at this point, even non-furries, because of Internet Historian's video, The Failure of Rainfurrest, which currently has 14 million views. So I'd recommend checking that out for a more in-depth look at the whole debacle, but in brief, Rainfurrest was a furry convention that started back in 2007 and came to a halt just after the events of the 2015 event. Now, the convention was getting bigger and bigger each year, starting in 2007 with 370 attendees, all the way up until the 2015 event with 2,704 attendees. But ultimately, the 2015 event descended into absolute chaos. There was drug use, damage to the hotel that was hosting the event. Some say it was the attendees, others say it was the work of anti-furry saboteurs. There's no definitive proof either way, and at this point I don't think we're going to get any. Like I say, for a more in-depth look, check out Internet Historian's video, link in the description. Fur Affinity. So Fur Affinity is a furry art website that allows artists to showcase their work and promote their commissions. As I've said before, I'm not really keen on this site. It's got a design that hasn't changed in years, it looks horrible, and it's super easy to get scammed there. I mean, it's happened to me twice, so I should know. The site itself was sold in 2015 to IMVU Inc., who make the social MMORPG IMVU, and then it was bought back in 2021 by the original owner, reportedly for more than it was sold for in 2015. Beastars. Beastars is a manga series which was turned into an anime by the studio Orange. The anime is incredibly popular in the furry fandom as it features a world of anthropomorphic animals. Now, I've not seen it myself, but I've heard it described as the anime version of Zootopia with similar themes. The weirdest thing that I've seen about this is that there's a stage play version in development, which isn't massively common for manga books. Yif. Starting off with some light spice like a Nando's lemon and herb, the term yif is used to indicate some kind of sexual activity or content within the furry fandom. A lot of people think the term yif is exclusive to fursuit sex, but that's not entirely accurate. The term can be used for any kind of anthropomorphic sexual content, including images and videos, as well as fursuit sex. Original species. Now, the furry fandom's all about creativity and original content, and what's more original than creating your own animal species? That's where original species come in. A lot of creators like to make their own species with their own rules, like closed species, which require you to get permission from the creator to use them. 20.5k furry art. So this moves nicely on from closed species, the 20.5k furry art commission. For a more in-depth look into this, I'd recommend Izzzyzz's video, The Story of the $20,000 Fursuit Commission, link in description. But, in brief, there's a closed species called Grem 2, which is popular, expensive, and sought after. Because of this, people often spend thousands buying adoptables or make your own slots from the creator, Grem Corps, which currently is the only way to get one. Now, the general gist of the story is that a bidding war started for a slot to make your own custom design, starting at $800. The auction was going pretty smoothly until a user known as Caravan Outpost decided they were in and wanted the slot. So the price quickly soared from thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars until the auction was finally won for the astounding price of $20,500. To date, this is still the most expensive furry commission ever, and because of the huge sums of money involved, it caused a massive stir in the community that's still talked about to this day. Furry slang. I think this is probably in reference to the vast amount of furry terms in the fandom, including things like OO, YIF, beans, snoot. Izzzyzzz. Wow, so what can be said about Izzzyzzz that hasn't already been said, and I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. So, the creator of the Izzzyzzz character has disabled all of their accounts, so there's not much information available, but I think they were considered the God of Furries, having several commissions including their character dropping an apple on Newton's head, and also having them kind of pulling the trigger on Archduke Franz Ferdinand, one of the sort of key events that led to World War I. For a more in-depth look at Izzzyzzz, I'd recommend Justin Whang's video, The God of Furries, link in the description. Your Name the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most popular anthropomorphic video game characters of all time. His franchise goes over games, cartoons, comics, and recently, movies. This led to fanfics and Sonic OCs, where people make their own characters within the Sonic universe. Now, this was a huge kind of trend in the early to mid 2000s of people making Sonic OCs, leading all the way up to the Your Name the Hedgehog meme. Essentially, this is where if you search Your Name the Hedgehog, there'll be a result guaranteed, regardless of what your name is. Why not try it now? Therianthropy. This is the mythological ability for humans to shapeshift into animals, known as TF in furry circles. The most common form of this being lichens, also known as werewolves. Egyptian gods. Now, I'm going to go ahead and guess that this refers to the fact that a large number of Egyptian gods, the vast majority, are human bodies with animal heads, such as Anubis, Horus, and Thoth. Begone, Thoth. Zootopia fanfics. So back in 2016, Disney released the animated movie Zootopia, also known as Zootropolis for European audiences. The movie was set in a world where everyone's an anthropomorphic animal, and the movie was, and is, still super popular among furries for obvious reasons. It's a great film. I love it. I think it's brilliant. It's also a furry Disney movie. Like anything on the internet, there are of course fanfics revolving around it, and yeah, I'm going to guess that not all of them are PG, especially with, Nick Wilde and Judy Hopps. Anthros. I'm guessing that this relates to the shorthand for anthropomorphic animals, that is, animals with human-like features. Normally in the furry fandom, this refers to human proportions and usually being bipedal. Feepaw. In 2002, an adult furry website called Yifstar launched. The website was a huge collection of user-submitted erotic furry fiction and artwork. Some of the users of the Yifstar forums created the Feepaw, a mixture of the Greek letter phi and a paw. This was originally used for members of the fandom to wear as like a way of a secret signal to other furries in public, And unfortunately the feed port isn't kind of used too much anymore. I don't know if it was ever used massively, there's no real record of it being a huge thing, but it's since kind of faded into obscurity, along with the Yifstar forums, which are now closed. Anti-furry. So anti-furry or anti-furs is the term given to people who oppose the furry fandom as a whole. They are often known for trolling and hating members of the fandom because they dislike the idea of the hobby, often due to the misconceptions that the furry fandom is all just one big sex thing. Wares. I'm guessing that wares kind of refers to the colloquial suffix term for Therianthropy, such as werewolves, and of course, were-rabbits. Furry councilman. So this refers to the story of Connecticut councilman Scott Chamberlain, who was forced to step down from his position after a resident of his region posted screenshots on Facebook of his private profile on So Furry, a website for erotic literature and art. Following these calls for his resignation due to his involvement in the fandom, Chamberlain stepped down from his position. Burned furs. So once again I'll keep this one brief, but for a more in-depth look I'd recommend The Fandom by Coyote, link in the description. The Burned Furs was the name of a movement in the late 1990s. The founders, Squee Rat and Eric Blumreich, believed that the furry fandom was overrun by sexually dysfunctional, socially stunted and creatively bankrupt hacks and pervs. Their words, not mine. The Burned Furs campaigned for a clean, non-sexual fandom, however their views extended to an anti-LGBT stance, and went as far as to threaten and enact violence to spread their views. Due to this, they were considered a hate group. Luckily, they went on to disband in 2001. Sexy airplanes. Now I'm going to go ahead and assume that this refers to anthropomorphic airplanes, which are kind of a bit of a meme in the fandom. Mouse Furry Art Auction, 1992. In 1992, an auction took place in Pennsylvania for a piece titled Surfacing by a local artist called Brian Swords. I'll be honest, I'm not too sure of how much I can show on YouTube, but the image depicts two white rats leaping from the water. One of the rats is wrapped around the waist of the other in an oral sex pose. This piece was kind of thrust into the public eye because of the TV personality John Oliver, who started a hunt for another piece by Brian Swords called Stay Up Late. Fatfurs. So this refers to people who enjoy both the furry fandom and weight gain. Fans of these will often have fat fursonas and incorporate other elements of weight gain such as inflation, blueberry and vor. Animism. This is a shamanistic belief that humans have animal spirit guides. From what I can tell, there's little to no link between this and the furry fandom, but perhaps there are some shaman furries out there that do follow this tradition. Mark Melino. Mark Melino is credited as one of the founders of the furry fandom way back in the early 1980s. He co-founded the first furry convention, Conference, and ran it way up until 1999. He continues to hold furry get-togethers to this day. For more information on Mark, I'd recommend Ash Coyote's The Fandom, link in the description. Steve Galacci. Steve Galacci is a well-known furry artist and cartoonist who is credited with creating the first anthropomorphic comic book primarily intended for adult audiences way back in 1983. He often attends furry conventions, with his first being Conference 1991 and his most recent at Anthrocon 2019. Otherkins. Now, otherkins and furries are often considered to be the same thing, however that is not the case. Otherkins believe that their soul is not entirely human, often believing that they're a different mythological race in a past life. Some examples include angels, demons, elves, fairies, dragons, and even aliens. Some furries also identify as being otherkin, however only a small minority. Tickle fetish. Right, so this is another one that I don't think is inherently furry, unless I'm missing something here. A tickle fetish is where someone has the desire to be tickled for sexual pleasure. Yeah, that's about it. Nothing all that furry. Frogsona. Now this is another weird one that's kind of made it onto this iceberg. Frogsona is the term for a fursona that's a frog. I guess there's some kind of labelling to be done here, like because a frog isn't furry, nor is it scaly. Let me know in the comments what you think a frogsona would qualify as. Now this is where things start to get a little bit more spicy, so don't say I didn't warn you. Sally Acorn Skeleton Doll. So Sally Acorn is a character from the Sonic the Hedgehog comic series and was pretty furry bait before such a thing was as common as it is now. Now, it's not unheard of for people to buy sex dolls. That is a plastic representation of a humanoid used for sexual activities, but they don't really make furry ones as far as I'm aware. I'll be honest, I've never looked. This is the story of a DeviantArt user, Gredendin, who created a life-size Sally Acorn sex doll that became infamous across the web, not just the furry side, the whole web. Now that in and of itself isn't all too weird. Sure, making a sex doll is kind of unusual, but it's not something that the whole internet's going to go crazy about. The weird part is that the doll's base is a human skeleton. Or is it? So, shock value aside, the creator cleared this up because of the huge amounts of complaint they received. It's, viral across the whole internet. You're bound to have seen this somewhere. The bones shown are actually carved from pine wood, then stained and painted. So, it's not as morbid as it once seemed, but it's still pretty uncanny valley. For a more in-depth look into this, check out the Sally Acorn Love Doll with a skeleton inside of it by Justin Whang. Link in the description. Impressive title. Okay, so on to something a bit less weird. Impressive Title was a free-roaming social MMORPG game inspired by The Lion King, with users playing as feral, feline and canine characters. The game was free to play and saw some kind of niche success, so much so that it led on to a successor, Feral Heart, in 2011. Goon. Goons refer to members of the Something Awful forums, a group that are infamous for trolling other groups such as Otherkin, anime, and most importantly for this video, the furry fandom. They would often turn up and troll conventions in real life, as well as furry spaces in online games. Now the staff of the Something Awful forum didn't condone this behaviour, stating that people found to take part in this would get a lifetime ban, but unfortunately that didn't really deter people. In recent years, the attitude towards furries on the forums has been a bit more relaxed, with some goons openly being furries themselves. Soviet furs. A Soviet fur is a niche furry subculture of people who have an interest in Soviet-era Russia and Eastern Europe either for cultural, reenactment, artistic or fetishistic reasons. Generally, Soviet furs do not promote or glorify communism or the Soviet Union, but like to share art and furry fiction relating to it. Nationalist furries. Furry nationalism was a very short-lived movement starting in 2005 as a way to promote a more sovereign, nation-like spirit within the fandom. The idea was to create a furry lifestyle of sorts that didn't really allow for cultural diffusion with other subcultures like sci-fi or anime communities, along with the belief that their identifying as a furry nationalist will avoid political rifts such as the one with the burned furs a few years before. The idea was posted on LiveJournal to much backlash. There was a 9-day flame war just a month after the idea was posted, ending in a stalemate. Since this point, the nationalist furry movement has been on indefinite hiatus. Improved Anthropomorphics. Originally, Improved Anthropomorphics started in 2005 under the name Burned Furs 2, as a continuation of the Burned Furs' original aim to make the fandom a better place, though with slightly different goals. They changed their name to avoid confusion and backlash in 2007 to Improved Anthropomorphics. The goals were to inspire a change within the fandom, not by the violence seen by the Burned Furs, but by setting a good example. The group particularly disapproved of Nazi furs and baby furs, along with many other groups they deem as giving the fandom a bad name. The group has since gone into hiatus. God Hates Furries. GodHatesFurries.com was an anti-furry satire website that parades furry artwork and websites along with satiric reviews and guides. The site also encouraged furries to email in so they could argue, and they had a gallery of poorly made fursuits that they would mock. Golden Age of Furry Fandom. This was a term coined by the Burned Fur group as reference to a purer time in the fandom before the prevalence of adult material and before fringe groups such as zoophiles and lifestylers appeared. Christian furries. So a Christian furry is essentially just a furry who follows Christianity, but they also bring their beliefs into the furry fandom, often by including anthropomorphic Jesus, depicted as a lion. There's a lot of conflict between Christian furries and other members of the fandom, as generally they are seen to be less tolerant of other people's beliefs, and they're generally seen to have overly conservative views. Fur speech. Fur speech is a constructed language within the furry fandom that involves working in words like fur and purr into existing words, for example, fursona or perfect. Although the term fur speech isn't widely known in and of itself, there are a lot of words that are known throughout the fandom. Baked furs. The baked furs started out in the early 2000s as a parody response to the burned furs drama of the time. The term baked in this instance refers to someone who is in the stage of drug intoxication, usually under the influence of cannabis. Sometime around 2006, the term was changed to denote furries who were involved in underground drug culture. Furry muck. Not a term I like to give all of you. Furry muck is actually the name of the oldest and second largest anthropomorphic muck. Muck refers to old, text-based online role-playing games that were primarily played through Telnet terminals. The service is still running and is popular within the furry fandom, although it is very outdated at this point, considering Telnet was deprecated in the mid-90s by Secure Shell. We're now reaching the bottom of the iceberg, but the topics continue on deeper beyond that. As with the previous section, viewer discretion is advised. Eat All Furries. Eat All Furries is a furry critic forum which had some kind of infamy back in the early to mid 2000s. The majority of the members and founders were themselves furries, and they used this message board as a way to mock fellow furries. Despite claims that they were being bigoted against furries, they claimed to have no agenda besides making fun of the strange and silly behaviour shown by furry fans. The website shut down in 2004 with all the content being purged from the internet. Nazi furs. Similar to Soviet furs, Nazi furs are a group of the furry fandom who have an interest in World War II era Germany. Originally started back in 2005, it was a group of furries interested in the history of Nazi Germany and the Third Reich, including interests relating to reenactment, uniform fetish, and military history. Much like the Soviet furs, Nazi furs do not condone nor wish to glamorise World War II era Nazi Germany, going as far as to ban any member who posts anything containing anti-Semitism or racial hatred. Now, I think they're deeper down in the iceberg because unlike Soviet furs, they've had quite a few controversies, including their members being anti-Semitic to other convention goers and trying to spread Nazi ideology. God's Creatures. There's not too much information about God's Creatures other than that it was, and possibly still is, a Christian furry mailing list. The group established on Yahoo Groups, where it continues. I think that due to the mystery of how little is known, it's become a bit of an urban legend. HTH. Hightail Hall, or HTH, is a massively popular adult furry role-playing game. It was launched way back in 2003 as a flash game on Newgrounds before going through development to public beta, which it's currently still in. The developers HTH Studios are hoping to get a full release on disc when the game is complete, however, it's been hit by numerous development setbacks over the years. The game can be played now, however, it's not free of its fair share of controversy, such as using copyrighted materials, namely the song Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode, which has now been removed, and removing areas from the $5 per month version of the game and restricting them to people paying $10 per month or more due to financial difficulties. Following the backlash, they did remove the tiered payment system, so now it's just $5 a month to get access. Bear Gay Culture. Now I've got another one that isn't inherently furry, but in gay culture there are a number of terms to define various different people and body types. Among these is bear, a term used for a large, hairy, older man. The man who became a dog. So the only thing that I could really find on this was the play by Osvaldo Dragon, in which a man is in need of a job. He's told that he can only get a job if someone else dies, is fired, or retires. After a watchdog of 25 years dies, the man who is in desperate need of a job agrees to take over and be the watchdog. In the agreement, he has to live in a doghouse, eat dog food, all for the pay of $1 a day. Over time, he adopts dog-like behaviour until the final act where he can no longer communicate other than in barks, no longer able to shift between being man and dog. Kaiketsu Zorori English dub. Kaiketsu Zorori is an anime series featuring anthropomorphic characters that's since been raised up to a cult-like popularity in Japan. Despite the popularity, an English dub of the series has never been released, though it has been dubbed in Korean, Italian and Spanish. Furry Renaissance. Once again, this is another term with very little information. All we really know is that the term was coined in 1998 and refers to furry fans who work together to bring the furry fandom to the general public, similar to like how anime has. Furry Peace. Furry Peace is a group which were formed in 1998 in response to the factionism brought by groups such as the Burned Furs. The main purpose of the group was to allow inclusion, acceptance and tolerance, and also taking responsibility for your own actions. Gyakushoun Sai Hanri. This is a partially lost Ace Attorney fan game released in 2003. The game was released in Japanese with all characters replaced with furry redesigns. At the time of recording, the demo has been found and is available for download, however the full game remains lost, with many fans across the internet searching for it. We're now deep in the abyss of the furry fandom. As with the previous section, viewer discretion is advised. The Fun Day Paw Pet Show 9/11 Special. The Fun Day Paw Pet Show is a long-running internet show based in Florida, often described as Monty Python meets the Muppets. On the evening of September 11, 2001, in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, they made a special broadcast to help those who were struck by the tragedy. They decided not to make the episode available for download after the initial broadcast. It's speculated that because of the sensitive nature of the show, the creator would not like to make it available, and with video capture software in its infancy, it's very unlikely that a viewer will have captured it, thus leaving it as lost media forever. Walt Disney was the first furry. Now this is probably on here as Walt Disney was one of the early pioneers of anthropomorphic cartoons, having created a character that frankly needs no introduction, Mickey Mouse, along with his friends Minnie, Donald and Goofy. It's therefore argued that with his love of anthropomorphic characters, Walt Disney was the first furry. See Martin Croker's Forbidden File. In 2016, animator and voice actor C. Martin Croker died of unknown causes. It's rumoured that he left behind a huge collection of drawings and various memorabilia along with all the artwork he ever did. This makes it plausible that some of his more NSFW material has been preserved. Although some pieces have been recovered, there is still Croker's Forbidden File, where he kept his most NSFW artwork, including a rumoured Tom and Jerry scat porn scene. Since his friends and family have chosen not to release this, it could be years, if ever, that we see this content. Rabbits in waistcoats. Now this is a pretty funny term that I've never really heard before, but is used in a derogatory sense to refer to stories with civilized animals who look feral in their own animal ecosystems, but wear clothing. Such notable examples include The Wind in the Willows, The Adventures of Peter Rabbit, Red Wall and The Fantastic Mr. Fox. Rotten Furs. The Rotten Furs are a group who came together in 2004. They are a group of furries who accepted that they enjoy various fetishes and paraphilias that are not normally seen as socially acceptable. They group together to spread the message that, although they may make the fandom look bad, it's not their intention to bring the fandom into disrepute and simply to express their interests. They operate an IRC channel and are accepting of any fetish. Apathetic Furs. There's very little known about this other than that it was a suggestion for a joke group for people who didn't like the Burned Furs, we speak for the fandom type mentality. The Werewolf 1913. This is another lost media piece. A silent film released in 1913, The Werewolf is reportedly the first feature film involving lycanthropy. Originally the film was based on an old Navajo legend of a girl who turns into a wolf as opposed to a traditional lycanthrope trope. Although posters exist, all known copies of the film were reportedly destroyed in a fire. thank you to everyone who's joined me thus far. If you've made it this far, leave the video a like. We're on to the final section, Mariana's Trench. Dragons fucking cars. Okay, so this is a bit of a meme over on the Dragons fucking cars subreddit. I don't think anybody's actually getting sexual pleasure from these images, but from what I can tell it's just a big joke, considering the majority of the top posts on the subreddit are jokes about dragons fucking cars with no actual original artwork. Though while looking this up I found this post from Lexus. Enter the dragon indeed. Concerned parents against the furry fandom. The CPATFF is a parody, hoax, anti-furry Facebook page created back in 2014. Their About page states that they want to inform weak-minded individuals who are in a cult called the furry fandom that they worship false idols. They would often make posts aimed at furries, bronies, Sonic fans and Homestuck fans, claiming that these groups engaged in perverse behaviours, often linking articles where furries were supposedly involved in criminal activities. The group got into quite a bit of trouble as for a time they used an unauthorised photo of Susan Broom, a UK-based business owner whose photo they stole from LinkedIn. The Man from Ulm. In 1937, a prehistoric mammoth ivory sculpture of a man with the head of a lion was found in a cave in Ulm, Germany. The figurine itself ascribed sexual characteristics, having a sculpted penis as well as the head of a European cave lion. The construction of the statue was found to have been a very complex and time-consuming task. The purpose of this statue is still unknown. Everyone was a furry in childhood. Now, as far as I can tell, this is the belief that during childhood everyone was a furry. I think this has to do in part with the cartoons we watched. I mean, looking back into my own childhood, I used to watch things like Arthur, Pinky and the Brain, Batfink, and Danger Mouse, lots of different anthropomorphic cartoons, so to a degree I can see what they mean by this. Zoophilia sub-communities. So this is the final topic of the iceberg and it's by far the most disgusting. Now, zoophilia, also known as bestiality, is a sexual paraphilia revolving around animals. People who are zoophiles engage or want to engage in sexual practices with animals. Now, the majority of the fandom, myself included, do not agree with this and quite rightly think that it is disgusting and abusive towards animals. Due to the general unacceptance in the fandom, the majority of zoophiles have scattered into their own sub-communities, but unfortunately they still remain within the fandom. It's a real shame because there is this perception of furries being sexual deviants, and the presence of zoophiles just make the whole fandom look bad. So there we go, that was the furry fandom iceberg. This is the biggest video I've ever made to date, and honestly I'm dreading the edit. But I hope you all enjoyed this video, I hope it was informative. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.